You're listening to Heroic Reflections, honoring the stories behind the service, hosted by Liam Steele. On this episode, Aviation Electronics Technician, 3rd Class E-4, Jesse D. Reynolds, United States Navy.
So, where did you first serve?
I served in 2001 to 2005. I started, well, of course, you had boot camp. I lost video here. But I started in boot camp was in Chicago. Then after boot, I had to go to A school and C school. A school was down in Pensacola, Florida. That was for about a year. And then I went to Miramar, which is out in California, Miramar Air Base, and that was where my C school was. And then after I was done with all my schooling, my station was in Virginia Beach at NAS Oceana.
Okay.
What was it like on your first day when you first arrived in boot camp?
Nerve-wracking. I was kind of I didn't really have a good path when I was younger. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I barely graduated high school, and I kind of worked odd jobs here and there. So I didn't join boot until I was 22, which was good for me because I wasn't ready when I was 18. So it was a lot better because I was a little older. But it was the first time I had left Indiana, where my family all is. So it was totally different. I'd never flown in a plane before. I'd been out of state on, vacations where we drove. But it was my first time on my own. So it was definitely nerve wracking. But once you get settled in, it wasn't that bad.
What was it like during what was your experiences during the events of boot camp and ANC school?
Boot camp was tough. Again, getting used to being around a bunch of people you don't know, being away from home. But initially it was rough, but it's one of those things where you get used to a new normal kind of thing. I was there for 8 weeks. And boot camp is definitely something I think a lot of people should go through because it teaches you discipline, little things that most people take for granted. You learn you have to have your locker a certain way. You have to have your bed made a certain way. So it teaches discipline, patience, but it was definitely something that I needed for sure. But I think a lot of people would benefit from going through something like that.
Very, very interesting. Thank you. Did you ever have to go anywhere for the service? Were you deployed to a different country, like in Europe or something like that?
Yeah, in 2004, June to December, I was on the aircraft carrier, the JFK, John F. Kennedy, because I was an aviation electronics technician. So I fixed the electronics for jets, the Tomcat and the Hornet jets in the Navy. So we had to go out on the carrier, and this was in the same time we were at war in Iraq. So we actually went over to the Persian Gulf. We stopped, we got to stop in Malta, which is an island just south of Sicily, on the way in for, a couple days, and then stop by Spain on the way out. But for a good 5.5 months, we were sitting in the Persian Gulf, a couple 100 miles off of Kuwait. And that's definitely another experience that you don't really get anywhere else, but it was, working 12-hour days, and then, making sure planes can fly so they can do their missions during wartime.
What was it like living on the aircraft carrier during this time period?
Most people in the Navy, when I talk to them, before I went out, I asked people what it was like on the carrier or on a boat in general, and they didn't really like it. I actually loved it, because it was simple. You got up, you had breakfast, you worked, um, and then you had time to hang out with some people that you knew when you had your off hours. But it was it was it was a simple kind of thing. You knew what you were doing day in and day out. Um, Definitely makes you feel kind of small when you're out on the carrier and looking around and there's nothing else but water. Um, but it's another one of those things like boot camp. If you never really got out of your hometown or whatever and met new people, like when I went to boot, there was people from New York City, from California. You got to meet new people, and on the carrier, you're talking about 3,000 people, or at least 3,000 people, all in an area that's like 2 football fields long and a football field wide. So it's um, close quarters with a bunch of people you have to get to know because you know you're all there for 6 months. So
What was your job like? Was there a certain part on the planes that you fixed?
yeah, I my shop fixed a lot of electronics on the Tomcat, and then we started moving on to the Hornet because the Tomcat was getting phased out. Um, I worked on my specialty was working on the display for the rear seat of the F-14 Tomcat. So in the Tomcat, you have a pilot and a Rio. The Rio is kind of like the weapons and radar kind of guy. Um, so on the back seat, they have a display in front of them, and I worked on that one most. Um, but when you're out there, you kind of work on anything that comes in that needs repairing. But most, I'd say 90% of the stuff that I worked on was on the Tomcat, and that cruise that I was on was actually the last time that the Tomcats went out. And then I got out of the Navy, but everybody I used to know that worked on, the Tomcat stuff had to move over and start working on the Hornet jet. So,
Cool. That's very interesting. Do you have any like memorable experiences from when you were serving on the aircraft carrier?
uh, a lot of it was, there's a area on the boat called the Crow's Nest. It's when you look at the carrier, you have the tower on one side, on the top of that, there's a little platform that you can go up on. You can't stay up there very long, but there were nights when sometimes I was working nights. I would go up there and watch the jets take off and come in. And it's kind of surreal because you're up there and if there's nothing going on, you're looking around, you don't see anything because you're in the middle of, the Persian Gulf. So you see black all around you and you see jets taking off and coming in at high speed. Um, I think of all the time that I was in, especially when I was on the carrier, that was probably my favorite moment, sitting there watching flight operations go in and out while, you know, in pitch black everywhere else.
Mhm.
That's pretty amazing. Did you happen to be sir or like deployed anywhere else throughout your time in the military?
No, I didn't. When in certain grades
Mhm.
like aviation electronics, fortunately for me, the reason why I picked that rate was because I got to go to school for a long time. Like it was like a year and a half of my 4 years, I was able to go to electronics school. Because when I went in, I knew nothing about it, um, how to fix, electronic gear. Um, so when I got to my duty station in Virginia Beach, I only had 2.5 years left. So that was the only time I got to go out. I was going to re-enlist. Um, After that cruise, I found that I loved it out there, and I was going to re-enlist and stay in. And then I found while I was out, I injured my back and had to have a back surgery. So my re-enlistment really wasn't going to work out because of that. Um, so I would have gone on again if definitely would have gone on again if I was able to re-enlist. But that was the one time I got to go do it. So
Okay.
Um, oh, you can go in.
What's your favorite advice for someone thinking about joining the military?
Uh, well, there's a couple things. On one side, it's if you feel like if there's a the way I was, if you really don't feel like you have a certain direction you want to go, maybe you don't want to go to college, maybe a trade school doesn't feel right for you. Going into the Navy is a great place, or any military branch. My brother's in the Army, but going into the military is a good thing to help you learn discipline, um, and find a path that you can go on. Of course, the other thing I would say anybody wanting to join is if you go talk to a recruiter, their job is always to, get people in, right? So if you go into a recruiter and they say they want to give you this and this and this to join, make sure you get it in writing because they don't always give it to you. But my brother fell into that trap, even though I told him to make sure you get everything in writing. But no, it's a great place, for people that feel like they don't really have a path yet to learn discipline, um, hopefully get a bunch of school while you're in, and then you have your GI Bill. After I got out, I didn't use it right away, but I went back to school and went to Southern New Hampshire to get a bachelor's. I want to work on my master's, but I got a bachelor's in criminal justice and homeland security and terrorism, um,
Mhm.
which I wouldn't have done if I didn't have the military in my background.
What was
Uh,
it like after you got out?
Uh, Kind of like when I was going in, it was nerve wracking. I didn't, like I said, I hurt my back when I was on the carrier. So when I came off of the carrier, I only had like 5 months left. Um, so I was planning to re-enlist, but then found out that I couldn't. So for the last few months I was in, it was a lot of trying to figure out, well, what am I going to do? Where am I going to go? Am I going to go back to Indiana? Um, I found a job around the DC area working on electronic security, which is kind of like installing, cameras, access control for some buildings. And it's definitely a lot different being in the military and then being back in civilian life. I know a lot of people that I served with had a lot of trouble with it. It's a different atmosphere, way different. But hopefully while you're in the military, like I was very fortunate, the things that I was able to do in the military prepared me for getting out, being on my own, being able to find the jobs and get the jobs that I wanted. So it was, um, getting out was rough for a little bit, but I always fell back on my time in to kind of give me away or give me the path that I needed to go. Um, and luckily, learning electronics in the Navy has gotten me so many jobs that I I wanted. Working in electronic security, I've fixed marine electronics. I worked in semiconductor, which is companies that make memory chips on silicon wafers. So chips that are in everything nowadays. And I wouldn't have gotten any of those jobs if it wasn't for what I learned in the military.
Are you still
What's
in?
something?
Yeah.
Sorry. What's something you wish you knew before you joined?
Um, Honestly, I don't know. That's something I wish I knew before I joined. Other than that, get everything in writing thing. Um, I wish. Let's see. I don't know because everything that I kind of didn't know, and then I learned once I got in, were all pretty positive. I didn't have anything before that I knew when I was going to go in that it was going to be hard. There was going to be. I wasn't really used to discipline before I went in. I knew there's going to be a lot of things that were going to be different and harder. But I can't look back at it and say that there's anything that I wish I knew before that when I got in was negative. Everything kind of turned out positive for me, which I mean, maybe I'm lucky, but it was really good for me. And yeah.
Are there any people that you met in the service that you're still friends with today?
Yeah, being in the service with somebody is a different kind of relationship. Um, Especially people like the guys that were on the boat with me um in the Persian Gulf. There's a there's a certain kind of camaraderie that comes with being in that kind of situation. After I had gotten out, I moved to Manassas, Virginia, which is just west of DC, and worked a couple of jobs, and then I got a really good job at a place called Micron, which is in that semiconductor industry. Um, and anytime that I knew that there was openings, I reached out to all the guys I knew in the Navy, and actually was able to get a couple guys jobs there. And then I guess over time, just like everything else, people, friends you have or whatever, you kind of spread, everybody spreads out and kind of lose touch here and there. But um, there's definitely a lot of people that I try to reach out to, every month or something, just to, even if it's just a quick text saying, asking how things are. But um, all the people that I knew. I'd say if we met up again, it would be like we, you know, hadn't been apart for years. There's a there's a real friendship that comes out of being in the service together.
What did you learn from being in the Navy that you've been able to apply into your regular life now?
Um, Always being 15 minutes early for everything. Um, my wife, that drives her crazy. If I need to be somewhere, I'm always at least 15 minutes early, usually an hour. Um, no, if I the discipline um, and work ethic that I got in the military, if I hadn't joined the military, I wouldn't be where I'm at today with my career. Um, but I would say, yeah, the discipline, the work ethic, you're expected to perform, and um, you kind of have to. It's the mission, right? So I would say those two things um, I've held on to coming out of it that has helped me a lot through my civilian life.
Mm. Okay.
What was it like on like your last day in your like 4 years of service?
Uh, it was difficult. Um, like I say, there's, of course, when you're going to, you go to school and then you go to your station, you're not with the same people the whole time you're in, but um, especially at my workstation, my duty station in Virginia Beach, there was a close group of people that I knew that, we all kind of depended on each other to get through whatever we needed. Um, so walking out, I guess I would relate it to leaving high school. Of course, you guys don't know about that yet either, but it's one of those things where it's such a big part of your life that when it changes, um, it kind of hits you a little hard. But it's just one of those stages of life, I guess. Like leaving high school is going to be one of those things. When you put yourself into something that you spend years doing, it's always kind of hard to walk away. Um, but I wouldn't change anything. But I wish I could have reenlisted. But now knowing where I'm at, I wouldn't change anything. But um, it definitely was hard walking away, knowing you're no longer active military.
Mm.
Do you have any fond memories from when you were in the military?
Uh, Yeah, I had quite a few. Is like I said, when I was out, there was a lot of things, you know, looking out and seeing nothing, and kind of getting a feeling of how small you are compared to everything. Um, Being up on the crow's nest, watching the flight operations. While I was out on the carrier, I also made third class, which is E4, and you finally get your crow on your arm instead of just a couple stripes. Um, so that was big. And then right before I got out, I was given a couple of awards for the work that I did while I was in, and that was a big one for me, knowing that I'm not going to be able to stay there, but at least my time in wasn't wasted. It was appreciated. And then like graduating boot camp. The last part of boot camp is you're up for 24 hours with all your people and all the people in your division, and you don't sleep. You go from doing one thing to another, to try to see if they can break you down to build you back up in boot camp. But that last day is, once you get through that 24-hour being awake and doing everything and knowing you're going to graduate is a huge moment, I think, in anybody's military career.
Okay. So I got one more question. So for some people that might read about My Eagle Project, is there anything else you'd like to know, like them to know about what you did during your service or about you?
Um, I think the biggest thing I've always tried to tell people about my service is kind of my background, and how growing up I didn't really have a lot of discipline at home. Um, I was on my own a lot, and I didn't really have a path or knew what I was doing or where I was going to go, or you know, like I said, barely graduated high school, kind of was on the wrong path in life. But um, actually joining the military and getting getting through boot camp and all that, joining the military, I think, and I don't want to be hyperbolic, but I think it kind of saved me. So it definitely can help people who don't know where they're going or what they're doing, um, to kind of give themselves a path to build a better life afterwards. Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
Thank you for listening to this edition of Heroic Reflections, honoring the stories behind the service, hosted by Liam Steele.
This podcast is part of the NORCAS Podcast Network. Check out more podcasts at podomatic.com/NORCAM.